It matters. What you do matters. It matters infinitely. And to actually know my true identity is to know that God is the infinite intimate that knows my name. And I participate in the infinite intimate. I'm a unique expression of the infinite intimate. I am literally God's verb. I am God's adjective. I'm God's dangling modifier. Like Christos is alive and meaning I am not dead, I can be resurrected. And my aliveness comes from, right, this ability to actually focus and concentrate, whether it's writing a review or whether it's helping an old lady across the street, but not begrudgingly. I'm going to pour into one act, literally one act of grace, one act of just radical, devoted, alive, gorgeous, celebratory service, right, turns death into resurrection. I didn't want to miss one mountain with you this week. This is where we do the deep work. This is where we do the deep conversation. Last week was our 7th or 8th conversation on talking to God, right? God as the infinite intimate, right? The realization that God you don't believe in doesn't exist, but that we don't dismiss the word God. Something deeper happens. Some newer, deeper, more wondrous possibility emerges. We begin to disclose what we mean by God. And what we mean by God is not simply, the energy of cosmos, although God is the energy of cosmos. There's a very deep realization of what God is in the first person, at the first person of God. There are 3 primordial perspectives in reality. There's a first person of God, there's a third person, and there's a second person, which are dimensions of reality itself. Reality itself is constructed from 3 persons, from 3 fundamental perspectives. Reality is I and we and it. And it's deep. It's before reality is anything. Reality is perspectives, right? Reality is a set of relationships. Okay. Wow. And we're going to have this wild conversation today, an insanely important conversation where I want to try and open up the space and then invite you, if you can, next week. If you can make it to mystery school and you want to be in a room that's going to change your life and be with people physically embodied in a room, we're going to be doing an incredible journey. And one of the themes of the mystery school is going to be the medicine and the Dharma, the relationship between medicine. What is the world of medicine journeying? And Dharma, but it's really not about medicine. It's not about Dharma. It's about how we know what we know, right? How we make the journey that makes our lives just this stunningly beautiful and profound and potent and poignant life that keeps the promise of my birth, right? And, before we're born, there's a very deep tradition in the interior sciences that before we're born, we're asked a question. And this appears in a text in one of the great lineage masters named Isaiah. And something like this: on high, we're asked, who will go? Who will go? Who will go? And then there are some of us who say, I will go. Heneini, here I am, I will go. And those who say, I will go, I will enter into this world. I will enter in this world and embody as a manifest human being. And I will participate in the evolution of love. I will become in my life a unique quality of love, a unique quality of intimacy. I will, in every detour of my journey, and my friends, have we had detours? We've lived so many detours, right? We've lived so many detours, and we've said no so many times. We've said no so many times. So here's a poem by Rumi. Rumi says, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. right? How many of us have become in our lives lovers of leaving? How many times have we left? Lover of leaving. It doesn't matter, lover of leaving. Come, whoever you are, wherever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. All right, we're not coming together in this mystery school for a caravan of despair. We're going to talk about existential risk. We're going to talk about the meta crisis. But ours is not a caravan of despair. Ours is a caravan of hope. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times. Come, yet again, come. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times. Come, yet again, come. Like, oh my God. And I was meditating on this text last night, right? It's such a beautiful text. How many of us have sometimes the feeling that we've broken our vow 1,000 times? And so therefore we can't come. We feel like somehow we're not invited. We feel like somehow reality has become, when we look at it deeply, a caravan of despair. We are on a caravan of hope, my friends. We are deeply aware of existential risk. We are here in one mountain, many paths. In order to transform into who we must become. And in fact, the name One Mountain, Many Paths is going to start transforming into who we must become. We are the community of who we must become. Who we must become in order to live a life which is fully alive, which responds to the original promise we gave, my original self that made my original promise. And my original promise in the text in Isaiah, responding to the question of who will go? Who will go? I will go. I will go. And what did I say when I said I will go? I said, Heneini, here I am. Here I am. I'm going to show up. And we come to this world and somehow it's so hard to stay. It's so hard to stay in the parts of myself that I don't want to look at. And only a person who's willing to occasionally be displeasing to themselves can be a sweet shelter for Jesus, wrote one French saint 150 years ago. Right? But we leave a deep examination of who we actually are. We're not willing to ever be displeasing to ourselves. So we lock the door of those rooms. And then we leave the rooms of our creativity and our joy and our wonder. We leave the rooms which are the rooms of our greatness. We forget to confess our greatness. And so we leave those rooms. And somehow we break our vow 1,000 times. The Bodhisattva vow that I had the great privilege to talk about in a book called Your Unique Self, published in 2011. In chapter 4, we talk about the Unique Self Bodhisattva vow. And our dear friends David and Claire created the Unique Self Institute, right? Committed to understanding what does it mean to respond to that Bodhisattva vow? What does it mean to live as an irreducible unique self? What does it mean to actually say, Heneini, here I am? So that's the invitation of Mystery School. Come to Mystery School online if you can't come to it in person. And everyone who's here and everyone's going to get an invitation to the Mystery School online, like massively. So we have this incredible online space, which is like insanely beautiful. So be in this online space, like crazy, beautiful, great space. It's going to actually create a living community of human beings that actually engage their humanity, that actually evolve the source code, that actually begin to create the new story of value about what it means to be a human being, that begin to articulate first principles and first values, that begin to evolve the source code of reality itself, so that the source code, the system doesn't break down, and that actually 1 trillion babies can be born in the future that otherwise may well not be born. Now, anyone who thinks I'm engaging in hyperbole is actually not tracking closely. And the reason we're not tracking closely, because it's impossible to track, because there's a broken information ecology, and it's almost unimaginably difficult, right, to track what's actually happening. You know, I sat yesterday morning at the home of, I will not say who, but a dear friend of mine, right, who was a chairperson of the center at a particular point, and a wonderful person. And we were talking about the Doge moves being made by Musk and company, right? And this person is intelligent and wise and incisive and profoundly liberal at the core of his being, meaning a liberal being, a kind of a being who's all about kind of love, right? And possibility. He said that Trump would go down possibly as one of the greatest presidents in history, right? Perhaps second only to Lincoln, even if he's a bad guy, right? Let's say he's a bad guy, who knows, right? Even if he is, nonetheless, right? What's happening in terms of Doge and the cuts in the budget were so important in terms of long-term health. Then I spoke 2 days before to another person I spoke to this person indirectly, who's very close to me, who's very close to one of my closest friends, who's also a deep partner, who's been deeply involved in a very, very important organization doing unimaginably important work in the world, unimaginably important work that was cut by the Doge cuts in America, and who spoke eloquently and also with great passion and depth about the direct, horrific damage being caused by those cuts. Now, both of those are unimaginably intelligent people. Neither of them are either in America, for example, Republican or Democrat. Neither of them are that. They're not on either side of the aisle. They're not lost in polarization. But both of them were unable to do more complex sense making. It's very hard today to do sense making. I started saying a decade ago that the information ecology was broken and that people were literally not able to do sense making, that the actual ecology of information, right, had become so polluted and so degraded and so corrupted that people simply couldn't do sense making. I took a walk X amount of years ago with one of the most famous writers in the world and a dear friend. And it was three of us walking, right? And this person is a great human being, a good human being, right, that all of you would love. And most of you know the name even. I won't either mention or allude to. And this person looks me straight in the eye and tells me, that what's called in the United States the Sandy Hook Massacre didn't happen. Now, the truth is the Sandy Hook Massacre did happen. But they look me straight in the eye and say it didn't happen. Not because he's crazy, but because the information ecology is broken. And they're all what are called false flag operations that are not actually conspiracy theory. They actually are false flag operations that are actually enacted by intelligence agencies. And he went down a rabbit hole of information which attributed the Sandy Hook Massacre to a false flag operation, which it was not. But this very smart, intelligent person was unable to do sense making. Does that make sense? So the sense making structure of reality is broken. And one of the things we do here in One Mountain, many passes, we do sense making. How do we actually do sense making? You can't do sense making if there's not a sense of first principles and first values. If you don't have a sense that value is real, you don't have a sense of first principles and first values, you don't actually read information carefully, you don't compare information and know how to compare it, right? How to actually find your way. We can't do sense making without a common sense of sensuality, right? Meaning we live in a cosmorotic universe. We live in an amorous cosmos that's animated by Eros value all the way up and all the way down the evolutionary chain. If I don't know that Eros, which is, and we have an entire book on it, right? And there's a set of, it's called First Principles and First Values. Maybe we can put it in the chat box. Maybe we can put it in the chat box if someone's got it. First Principles and First Values. So I'm going to get a sense of where we are. It's why I wanted to talk to you today from the airport, right? We've articulated First Principles and First Values, which is the seminal move that hasn't been done. And there's a new version of the book that literally just came out. There's about 20 critical new pages. So there's a set of 15 first principles and first values, and there's a interior science equation for every first principle and first value. And there's an interior science formulation for every first principle and first value. You cannot engage existential risk. You cannot engage the meta crisis. You cannot do sense making if you're not in a story of value. And if you don't actually have a set of first principles and first values, right? So first principles and first values is huge, huge. And then you got to begin to see, how do we apply those first principles and first values? Now stay with me for a second. The existential risk of artificial intelligence Stay with me. The existential risk of artificial intelligence cannot be engaged without first principles and first values. Can't be done. And the existential risk, right, of artificial intelligence is so intense and so real. And anyone who thinks it's not simply is lost, right, in the information ecology, right? I stake my life on it. I'm 1,000% sure of it. And in order to understand why that's true, you need to understand actually quite a lot about a lot of things, but let's bracket that for now. Okay, let's bracket that for now. That risk is extremely real, right? For multiple reasons, right? And part of the information ecology disguises what the risk is. We can't engage that risk without being able to create intersectionality, interface between artificial intelligence and value. That's an almost impossible thing to do because value is value is not mechanical, right? It's not just a formula. It's a formula that expresses a living realization. So how to upload value in AI, the value upload problem, is something that a very important thinker named Nick Bostrom talks about in a 2016 book called Superintelligence. An insanely important issue. But I'm not going to talk about that now. I'm going to say something even before that. Henry Kissinger, right before he dies, as we shared a bunch of weeks ago here, writes a book called Genesis. It's his second book that he wrote. He dies at age 100. Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State of the United States. He was also the architect of Bretton Woods. He was the architect of Bretton Woods. The great Bretton Woods was the post-World War II order, right, that the Allied victors in World War II established, right, in order to create some measure of stability in the world. So Kissinger is an architect of Bretton Woods, and he's a kind of global power player to try and create a stable world order, right, for, decades and decades. The world order was based in a Pax Americana and a kind of an American stabilizing force. And Kissinger spends the last 5 years of his life, right, studying artificial intelligence because he actually realizes that between ages 95 and 100 that artificial intelligence can undermine the entire stable structure that he had spent his life trying to establish. Kissinger's last book that he literally writes, spends the last breaths of his life on. Has everyone got literally the last breaths of his life? He writes this book with Eric Schmidt, and the third person, Eric Schmidt, was at Google, and he was the key figure in Google. He was the head of Google, hired by Sergey Brin and Larry Page, but he actually ran Google for many years. And he is the kind of master at artificial intelligence. He writes this book with a third person with Kissinger. Now, if you read the book, you could read the book as like, this kind of complex, curious, beautiful, but ultimately optimistic view. It's going to be okay. There's some challenges. And he writes the book, so he ambiguates. The word ambiguates, meaning he doesn't fully clarify the threat unless you know how to read him carefully. But if you read it carefully, and particularly read carefully chapter 8 and read the conclusion section, chapter 8 and the conclusion. Read chapter 8 and the conclusion. What he basically says, and again, he's pulling the punch and you have to know how to read him and know the literature. What he basically says is that there's two separate problems. One problem he just alludes to, how do you upload value into AI? But the second problem is, what is value? We have no idea what value is, right? We have no capacity to articulate we don't know what value is. We have no idea what human value is. So we don't know, right, how to actually interface between human value and AI. Right? And he basically says that the greatest existential risk in the world, he says it obliquely, he ambiguates it, but it's clearly there. And he came to the exact same conclusion. I mean this tenderly, right? But that I came to 15 years ago, and a group of friends around me and colleagues came to, all of us independently, which is the single greatest existential risk is artificial intelligence, which doesn't become alive. It doesn't become human. It doesn't develop human will or consciousness, but artificial intelligence is an autonomous agent. It's intelligent. It's not conscious. It's an autonomous agent, and it goes to fulfill its understandings of its directives. But its understandings of its directives are completely different than the way a human being would understand those directives. Does that make sense? So for example, Nick Bostrom talks about what he calls the paperclip maximizer. And the paperclip maximizer means, right, you give, this is a very gross and crude example, but I'm using it just as an example, right? You give, right, human beings, right, you give AI a directive, right, make as many paperclips as you can. And there's a much longer and complex issue, but essentially what AI does is turn all of reality into paperclips, right? The entire globe becomes paperclips. There's no more human beings. Paperclip maximizer, meaning according to the inherent logic of artificial intelligence, it comes to a set of conclusions that are self-evidently absurd, right, to human thinking, which feels eros and feels value and feels love, but are not absurd to the AI. And Eliezer Yudkowsky and Bostrom and an entire series, Hinton, who wins the Nobel Prize for his work in this domain at Google. I'm talking about the most serious players in the field that are actually being honest and that have not been essentially hijacked, which is what's happened in the last couple of years. I've basically pointed to the inherent nature of artificial intelligence as not conscious, right, not possessing human will, but as being an intelligent, autonomous agent, right, whose hermeneutic, whose method of interpreting its spec or its directive is essentially inscrutable. And we think when we're talking to AI, we're talking to our chat GPT-4. So Zach Stein and I have called that the personhood conferral problem, right? You think you're talking to a human being. That's actually, you're not talking to a human being in any sense, shape, or form. That's called the personal conferral problem by us, right? And it's based on a misunderstanding of how large language modules work. Large language modules, which are the huge breakthrough that's allowed for this new generation of AI to emerge, that have absolutely nothing to do with any kind of human reasoning. It's an entirely different process. Point of all of this, why are we talking about all this? Because what we're doing here is we're trying to together respond to the meta crisis and live the most stunning life we can live in mad celebration and joy, right? We're not making the doomer move. That's how we started. We're not doomers. We're not like it's over. We're not making the doomer move. We're not denying, right? So we're not making a doomer move. There's a huge doomer community that actually has studied this very carefully and believes there's no move left to make. It's basically over, and there's an inevitability to it being over, right? And of course, the claim of inevitability is a thought-terminating cliche, right? Thought-terminating cliche means if you say it's inevitable, you stop the conversation. So there's a doomer inevitability conversation. One, there's a second inevitability conversation that's taking place in the techno-optimist, TESCREAL kind of effective accelerationist communities of a kind of positive messianic utopian inevitability, right? Both of those are incorrect, but there's an inevitability, a doomer argument of an inevitability, and there's a utopian inevitability argument. But inevitability, again, are thought-terminating cliches. You stop the conversation when you say that's just the way it's going to go, inherently and intrinsically, okay? There's a denial conversation, which is in a broken information ecology, there's myriad vectors of essentially basically saying, hey, this is not an issue here. AI doesn't have will. It's not conscious. It's not a problem. You're misunderstanding AI. You're misreading AI. And there's an entire huge literature of articles of people making those arguments, which I believe are incorrect for multiple reasons. But there's an entire denial. And the denial has, again, two groups of people. People who are looking at AI and saying, oh, you're misunderstanding AI. You just don't get it. And then they explain why you don't get it and why this is not an existential threat, right? Or there's denial in the sense they won't look at it. Not that they're looking at it and respond. They just won't look at it. It's just not, they're not willing to violate the conviviality of their own days in order to actually look at what's actually going on in a serious way. So we have rejected the denial position, right? Denial is not an option. We face everything. We avoid nothing. That's part of our celebration. Nothing's hidden. Nothing's in the shadows. Nothing's split off, right? Our safety is in everything's on the table, right? No words that can't be spoken. Nothing that can't be engaged. So we've rejected the denial position. We've also rejected the doomer position. If I look down, if I'm in a doomer mode, or if I've given up, right, then hope and creativity. Hope is a memory of a possible future. right? Creativity is, right, as Alfred North Whitehead correctly said, creativity is the prehensive activity, or what my friend Gafni, yeah, that's me, calls the Eros value. Whitehead calls it prehensive creativity. I call it Eros value, meaning in the world of causation, a world in which yesterday determines tomorrow, a world of what we call inevitability, right? There's a vector, there's a place it's going, that actually can be interrupted. It's interrupted by Eros value. It's interrupted by freedom. It's interrupted by new creativity. It's why reality has new emergence. A new emergent reality means there's a new possibility. There's a possibility that never was, right? Hope is a memory of new possibilities. And then when we look down, when we're doomers, we can't access those new possibilities. We can't find them, right? They're not available to us. But when we actually step into the celebration, when we step into the joy, we step into Eros Valley, that's what we come together here to do, one mountain, many paths. We begin to access, right, new possibility, right? We begin to access the divine spark, which is the creative spark, which can create a new future, right? Because divinity at core, or Eros value at core, what the mathematician Whitehead called prehensive possibility, right? At core is the possibility of possibility. Reality is the possibility of possibility, right? There's actually multiple futures that can unfold before us. And we have to actually make the best future possible, but we have to do that by not looking away, not making the doomer move, not making the denial move, but making what we call here the new dawn, right? The Da Vinci move, right? The new dawn, the Da Vinci move, the emergence of a new story of value from which we generate new technological possibilities, from which we generate, right, new possibilities of creating a shared story of value, right? And then we actually begin to understand how we can actually interface value with AI, even though AI is not conscious, so it's not in a field of value, meaning it doesn't feel, right? The interior of the universe feels, and the interior of the universe feels love. But how do we actually get AI, right, in that conversation? So we don't quite know how to do that yet, but we can, and we will, right? But we can and we will if we don't turn away. And we don't turn away means we remain filled with hope. We don't turn away means we don't move to depression. We don't move to denial. We don't move to doomer, right? We are animated by the fullness of the possibility of possibility. And to do that, we have first principles. We got to start with first principles and first values. We're trying to get this book to key people in key places. We want to convey the sense of this community of people around the book. So people get a sense, you don't go to and say, okay, 10 people read it. You get a sense of a couple of hundred reviews. And so I'm turning to you, friends, Romans and countrymen, lend me your ears. Friends, Roman and countrymen, right? Lend me your ears, right? I'm saying, okay, here's a specific, unique, particular thing that you can do in order to generate the currency of Eros and energy, right, around this book, in order for it to actually, as we share it with key decision makers over the next year or two, and we just updated it, as I said, they can get a sense of the community around the book, so they get, oh, okay, right, that's extremely helpful. It's a small act, but every act is a small act, okay? And just notice, right, and I mean this so tenderly, right, it's like, right, it's like, it's a push. So you might think, okay, he's just going to give up and stop pushing. I won't, because I trust us and I believe in us, and I will not give up, and I will not stop pushing gently and cajoling gently and asking gently and begging sometimes and pleading and asking and joking and, let's seduce each other in the highest way to break the boundaries of our contraction, right? And to be in our greatness, like hello, right? Like hello. It's like we take small acts together, and those small acts are small rivulets, and those small rivulets become drops in a river, and the river becomes, right, a growing force, and it becomes a mighty river, and it sweeps through the land. But that is how it happens. It happens when we're so moved and we're so awake and we're so committed that we actually bring it to 100, and then we take the next step, and we take the next step. And every individual step that I take, I pour all of my love into. Can I share something with you? What I mean by that? It's such a deep idea. So let me share with you a very beautiful doctrine in the interior sciences, right, that shaped the Renaissance, okay? Right, and a gorgeous, gorgeous document of the interior sciences that shaped the Renaissance. And it's a document by Chaim Vital, right, who is the student right? Yes, brother. He's the student of Isaac Luria. And he talks about what Habermas, probably the greatest living philosopher, I think he must be 96 or 97, right? In Germany, right? Habermas fell in love with this idea from Lurianic wisdom, the wisdom of Luria, written in Safed, above the Sea of the Galilee in the 16th century. And he talks about Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum. And Tzimtzum means when infinite divinity, right? Infinite divinity contracts into a point. Okay? And then from that point creates. So my friend Lena, when she paints, it's not a separate self Lena painting, right? It's all of reality painting through her. It's all of infinite divinity, right? Finds its way into Lena, and actually she disappears, and the wholeness of reality moves through her, and she paints. That's Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means infinite divinity, not contract, the way it's usually translated by scholars. Infinite divinity concentrates itself, not contracts, concentrates itself in a point. Okay, that's Tzimtzum. Infinite divinity concentrates itself in one point, then explodes in ethos, in creativity, and kindness. Or I'll give you another example. Okay, this is just, please keep this quiet because it'll be misinterpreted. I like helping old ladies across the street. When you help an old lady across the street, you can't do it like with this proud sense, like here I am helping an old lady, right? You help an old lady across the street, and I mean this proverbially, of course, ecstatically. Like all of your kindness, in all of your delight, right? In all of your wonder, and all of your joy is poured in. Does that make sense? So meaning all of infinite divinity is poured into this one act. And oh my God, right? So that one act, that's called Tzimtzum. Infinite divinity is poured into that one act of helping that one old lady across that one street, and then all worlds, right, light up with joy. All that was dead is now resurrected, right? All that was crucified, right, now comes to life again, right? All that felt that no one stood by, right, at that moment, right, as the parties went on in Jerusalem and the Romans, right, did what the Romans did, right, and Jesus is crucified on the cross, and death, right, the loss of aliveness, the loss of goodness, the loss of ethos, right, the inability, right, to actually realize that power, right, in its broken form is not what reigns, but actually the promise must be kept, and it's a promise of goodness and truth and integrity and beauty, right? All of that's lost, right? Until someone actually puts their attention and says, I'm going to write a review. Well, small act of revolution. To write a review is an act of revolution. Wow, we need first principles and first values. They're critical. It's a piece of the story. I can't exactly see how my review is going to directly, right, affect existential risk and AI, but it's my rivulet in the river. It's my drop in the ocean. And as Rumi said, you think you're a drop in the ocean, you're an ocean in your drop. You get the difference? You're not a drop in the ocean. You're an ocean in your drop. All of it lives in you. And when my wholeness awakens, and says, all of my energy, all of my infinite divinity, all of my wholeness is going to pour into that one act of kindness. And I'm going to help that beautiful old lady across the street with kindness and joy and delight. So she feels like she is an object of reverence. She's a subject, right, of dignity, right? And she just feels welcome in the universe. And that welcome moves through her entire body, heart, mind. And the angels stop what they're doing because there was such an act of beauty, and they begin to sing, right, a new song. And the angels, right, it spreads through cacophonies of angels in all worlds, and the divinity, right, the ultimate personhood of cosmos, it, her, him, we self kind of awakens, and redemption begins. That's actually how it works. Right? Resurrection, right? Death turns into life. Right, on this day of Easter, on this day of resurrection, right? It's my small act, which is not small, because I'm pouring the repercussions and resonances of that act directly into the source code itself. Huh. Crazy, right? Is that crazy? Is that crazy? That's crazy. Our topic for today was world religion, right? Let me see if I can find it for a second, right? Like, oh my God, right? Oh my God. Our topic of today was world religion, Easter Mass, the crucifixion. So we're not doing that topic exactly, but the topic that we're doing is, and it's a great topic, the topic you're doing is, it matters. What you do matters. It matters infinitely. And to actually know my true identity is to know that God, the God you don't believe in, doesn't exist. But we're not afraid of the God word. That the God you don't believe in doesn't exist, but there's a deeper, truer version of that word, and we need to reclaim that word, because that word means that which ultimately matters. It means the world's not just matter, it's what matters, right? That God is the infinite intimate that knows my name. And I participate in the infinite intimate. I'm a unique expression of the infinite intimate. I am literally God's verb. I'm God's adjective. I'm God's dangling modifier. And what Luria meant in this great teaching is that literally Christos is alive in me. Like Christos is alive in meaning I am not dead, I can be resurrected. And my aliveness comes from, right, this ability to actually focus and concentrate, whether it's writing a review or whether it's helping an old lady across the street, but not begrudgingly. I'm going to pour into one act, literally one act of grace, one act of just radical, devoted, alive, gorgeous, celebratory service, right? Turns death into resurrection, right? It's like, huh, right? The whole thing's alive, right? The whole thing is glimmering. The whole thing is shimmering, right? The life that moves through me is poured into all of reality, and all of reality lives and breathes and pulses and tumesces in a way that was never possible before. Like, huh, that's what it means. My friends, this is, and I'm here at the airport, and we got to get on a plane, but I just didn't want to miss the privilege of being with you today. So just between you and me, we've all gotten crucified. Have you ever been betrayed? Let me ask a question in the chat box. Who's ever been betrayed? I'm just in the chat box, just us. Forget about the flight. There's no flight. Just be with me just for 2 minutes, okay? Let's just be honest. Who's ever been betrayed? Have you ever been betrayed? Who among us have not been betrayed? Right? I mean, my friends feel that with me. Who among us have not been betrayed? Who among us have not betrayed? Who among us have not had a promise that wasn't kept? Who among us have not had our image distorted? Who among us have not felt, right, literally the nail driving into my body as I'm crucified? Right? No one, not one of us. We've all been betrayed. And who are we betrayed by? By Judas. We're always, you can never be betrayed by anyone other than a person who could never betray you. Does that make sense, my friends? You can never be betrayed by anyone other than a person who could never betray you. That's what betrayal means. Betrayal means you would never betray me, and you did. That's betrayal. Right? And Dante, right, sets up betrayal as, Dante sets up betrayal in Dante's Inferno, right? You've got kind of Judas and Cassius, right, who kills Caesar, right, in the inner spokes, right, of hell, right? But Dante got it wrong, because Dante didn't get Jesus, okay? And I want to share this with you as a person who was trained as an Orthodox rabbi, right, in the Hebrew wisdom tradition. And I practice in Buddhism, and I practice in Sufism, and I practice in Kashmir Shaivism, and I practice, of course, in Christianity, and I practice in native traditions, because it's got to be a world spirituality as a context for our diversity. But let's be in Easter today, okay? Let's be in the Christ today. Let's be in the Christ. Who among us has not been the Christ? We've all been crucified. We've all been crucified. We've all experienced death. We've all deadened. We've all become dead, and we've all lost access to the dream, right? But what happens to a dream deferred? Writes the poet Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, bloated, and then explode? We have to reclaim the dream. You know how we reclaim the dream? We reclaim the dream through acts of hope, through realizing the world's not ordinary love. It's not ordinary love. It's not a social construct. right? The world is outrageous love, and outrageous love is the inherent nature of reality itself. And we live in a world of outrageous pain, and the only response is outrageous love, which means that who we are in our very being is we are the Christ, and Christ is an outrageous lover. And what does an outrageous lover do? An outrageous lover commits outrageous acts of love. That's what an outrageous lover does. An outrageous lover commits outrageous acts of love, right? And mine aren't yours to commit, and yours aren't mine to commit. We each have unique, outrageous acts of love that are ours to commit, and they actually change and transform reality. And there are thousands of us gathered in this call around the world, right? And each of us has an outrageous act of love to commit that has the capacity, right, to potentiate, to change, to transform reality. And often those outrageous acts of love are invisible, anonymous. I'm going to write a review. I'm going to hold an old lady across the street, right? I'm going to find a part of myself and reach and apologize when I didn't know how to apologize. And I'm going to forgive Judas. I'm going to forgive Judas. Love everyone without exception. Doesn't mean don't be careful, but the key is without exception. Without exception. I sat with my old friend, John Mack, yesterday, and John just finished giving a TED talk about love everything without exception. Without exception, no exceptions. Judas is forgiven, right? The Judas in me is forgiven. And it's only when we forgive each other that we can love again. And when we forgive ourselves that we can love again. When I love again, then I become the infinite intimate, and I literally concentrate all of the wholeness of reality inside of me. The last sentence, to be enlightened means not only to be connected to the whole, but it's to know that the whole lives in you. And as such, I commit an outrageous act of love. It's a small act. It seems anonymous. It often is anonymous. It seems like it's just a rivulet. And it is a rivulet, but it's a rivulet which is a drop that becomes a river. Remember what we just said. It's not that I'm a drop in the ocean. Right? The whole ocean lives in my drop. Okay? Welcome to Easter. Welcome to resurrection. Welcome to the bliss crucifixion of being resurrected and knowing that she moves in me, she acts in me, she lives in me, knowing that I am God's verb. And I'm God's unique verb, unlike any other. What a crazy joy. What a crazy joy, right? And it doesn't matter if it's hard. So I'll find a place to sit at the airport and we'll talk to each other, and it won't be perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Happy Easter. Happy resurrection. The Christ lives, and the Buddha lives, and the African traditions live. And then we live, and we're here in one mountain, many paths, right? To actually participate together in the evolution of love, to respond to the meta crisis, right? To create the world that's waiting for us to manifest it. And it's already true. The promise is already kept. Let's just show it to be that. So mad love, everybody. Like mad, crazy love. It's the greatest honor of my life to chat with you, to be with you. Oh my God. Mad love, Krista.
Thank you. Wow. That was just on fire. Can everyone feel that? Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I really do want to recommend to spend some time on our Substack, because on Substack, we publish every week the edited transcripts of the previous week teaching. And especially today, like there were just so many sentences that were so gorgeous and so holy and so beautiful. But we actually have published 2 new books in the great library. So this is Homemade, The Future of Relationships. Amazing book number 1. And of course, we're going to talk a lot about this in the coming weeks. And this is The Evolution of Love, From Quarks to Culture, The Rise of Evolutionary Relationships in Response to the Meta Crisis. So these 2 books, of course, belong together. The books on relationship and reality is relationship. You definitely want to get those. And of course, also write your reviews for those. And these books are also going to be like the sacred texts that we're going to be studying at Mystery School in 1 week from now. So please do join if you can come to Holland. Of course, join us here. And if you can't, you can also join us online. So make sure that you register, that you sign up. You'll get all the recordings so you can watch it at your own time. So if you have a couple of people, gather them and let's study together at Eros Mystery School. You can find out more information, of course, at erosmysteryschool.com.